there's two types of report that we do, isn't there? So there's the initial impression, and then there's the Part 35 CPR ready. So can you just briefly just describe the difference between those two reports?
Yes. A letter of opinion versus a CPR Part 35. A letter of opinion is written to the client, and usually people sort of say, look, I'm not sure what's going on. Could you write a letter of opinion to give me some guidance? Now, what I would do with a letter of opinion, I lay out all the evidence we've talked about, but it's written to them. Now, when you have a CPR Part 35, which is Civil Procedure Rules Part 35 or Criminal Procedure Rules, you're not writing to the client, you're writing to the judge. So you are totally independent of who has paid you. So a client may pay you, but you're not writing to that client, you're writing to the judge, and you have to actually demonstrate total objectivity, that you may even write a report against the person who's paid you. But that's obviously the key point, that your job as an analyst is to help the court. It's not to defend the person who paid you. Now, that is the difference. So a lot of people sort of say, look, I want a slightly cheaper letter of opinion. I want to get a feel for whether I've got a case, and I will lay out the total amount of evidence, often on photocopies. But when it goes to court, a judge will tend to say, look, has the wet ink original been examined? Now, the reason for that is that when you're looking at the ductus, you get a tremendous amount of information. You look at the border of the stroke, you look at the pressure of the stroke, you look at the width of the stroke. You can't do that with a photocopy. So when you go to court, if you're moving from a letter of opinion to a CPR Part 35, it's very critical that you actually have the wet ink original. Now, when I'm moving to a court case, I always require a client to be absolutely clear and state, I cannot give you the wet ink original. So the judge knows that there is no other material that can be examined. And for instance, the land registry tends to collect all its signatures for houses, but doesn't keep the wet ink original, which can cause a lot of problems, because a signature can move a house from one owner to another, and yet the wet ink original, which is actually vital, is not available. So that is the difference between a letter of opinion. It goes from the client to the court itself. So you'll have a slight change of objective. The objective being your job as an analyst is to help the court make a decision, not necessarily to be a defendant advocate for the person who's paid for the letter of opinion. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, totally. So lastly, I just wanted to discuss with you, I mean, we've had loads of chats about this, around the graphology side. So we had a really interesting chat about how you can tell the behaviour, whether they're a drug taker, just from looking at a person's writing. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, the point is that handwriting is known as frozen body language. So in the same way that you could look at somebody, get a feel for them, you also have that same feeling about a person from the writing. For instance, all our characteristics of behavior are unified. I mean, you could say very simply that somebody who walks quickly might write quickly. So what you're looking for is, what is the symbolism in the writing that is telling you something about that person's personality? Now, for instance, what I get for recruitment is a lot of things that you cannot actually ask in an interview. People can't sort of ask, are you honest? Because I always say there's only one answer to that. You have to say, am I honest? Of course I'm not. Now, that's always a shock to the interviewer. But the reason for that is you cannot say you are honest, because if you're going to be looking at your wife's dress, it's very difficult to be honest and say, I know you spent a lot of money on it, but I hate it. I don't like that dress. So in life, to get by, there has to be a slight element in good manners of dishonesty. Now, because of that, you can look at handwriting and you can see a tendency for dishonesty. So though you can't get this clear in an interview, there are certain tests you can do on writing, about 13 tests, that say, look, there is an issue with this person. that might be a problem. So if you're employing this person to drive an £80,000 car to Scotland, be careful, because they might drive it over to Holland and sell it to a friend of theirs. So that is the sort of question you get. The other sort of thing you get is, does this person have a temper? Can they work in a group? Are they very isolated? Are they good with people? Do they have a slight drug problem? Are there any health issues? And what people don't realize is that all this comes out in the writing. It's quite astonishingly rich that you get so much from a few words on a piece of paper. And from that point of view, it really comes at you that there's a personality that you've got to be careful about. And that brings me back to the point I made earlier, that forensically, when you're checking whether there's something funny going on and you see personality characteristics and one writing, it helps you when you're examining and comparing. But Graphology is basically used for recruitment and helping people in terms of relationships and so on, because you can tell so much about a person from their writing if it's cursive, ordinary writing. So I would be asking somebody, tell me in detail how you get from your house to your shops. Now, that's a neutral subject. So that there's no way of saying, well, I can tell this person likes gardening from his handwriting because he's put in this thing, I like gardening, which people do accuse graphology of, that you just read what they've said and you guess the personality. So what you're trying to do is get something that's very neutral, very detailed, and forces them to think in detail about what they actually do rather than worry about their writing. Because when you're looking at writing from a graphological point of view, you need tremendous fluency. And it's the fluency that gives you a feeling for what they're really like as a person. So in essence, it's about assessing the symbolism of the writing and connecting that with personality. Is that an answer, Simon?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I find the whole subject fascinating. And it took me a while to get my head round when we first started working together about what is the difference between graphology and handwriting. And you've covered that massively. And just on another note, I'm really glad that our correspondence is always via email and not handwriting. So I thank you. I thank you for coming on today, Adam.
Thank you.
No problems. That's another episode of Titan PI TV. Please give us a thumbs up. If you don't want to miss further episodes, then please subscribe. And until next time, thank you for listening.